Hey, good evening. Welcome. My name is Su Chang, and I'm the co-chair of AI Hong Kong Programs Committee this year. I also want to welcome Shannon Holl. Shannon is joining us this year as the Programs Committee co-chair. And tonight we have the first event of the first project series of the year. And it is a conversation series that focuses on the creative craft of practice. And we invite our speakers to share with us both their current preoccupations, but also how their earlier practice experience would prompt these kind of thinkings that we have right now. Our speaker tonight is Chen sitting next to me. Chen is a member of the American Institute of Architects and a registered architect in New York State. He received a bachelor degree from Tsinghua University and a Master of Architecture from Harvard University Graduate School of Design. He worked at Ingels Group and in Copenhagen and Stephen Holl Architects in New York from 2009 to 2017. In 2017, Chen returned to China and started teaching at Shenzhen University School of Architecture. He founded his practice, Atelier XI in New York, and he's now based in Shenzhen, China. The lecture tonight will last for about 40 minutes, and then after the lecture, Chen will be joined by Roberto Riquejo and an associate member of AIA, design director of Imaginary Objects, the lecturer at the University of Hong Kong. So to our audience, please share with us your questions and comments anytime through the chat box and the Q&A box, and we will have the conversation around these comments after the lecture. Now, Chen. Okay, let me share the screen for you. Yeah.
Okay. Hi, good evening, everyone. Thanks AIA Hong Kong for the invitation, and thanks Su Chang for the introduction. It's a great honor to be here tonight. Actually, I'm also very happy the border between Hong Kong and Shenzhen finally opened. So I'm looking forward personally to more of this discussion and more collaboration and from both sides across the Shenzhen Bay. So tonight the topic is about the first project conversation series. Actually, ironically, we are a very young firm, and we only founded the office in 2017 with 5 years of practice. So actually, speaking about an architecture practice, we are still in this infant stage. And some of our earliest projects we haven't even fully finished. So today I'm just gonna briefly show what we have completed mostly, and some projects that we never published, but that serving as a connecting dots between different projects that we are developing. This is a office portrait of our office, as you can see. For me, being the oldest one in the office, we are very young, and we are located in Shekou, China. Historically, it's an important place as a first industrial kind of experiment zone in Shenzhen, even before Shenzhen was made a special economic zone, the first one in China. And our office, in front of office, there's still this huge slogan: "Time is money, efficiency is life." It was very controversial in 1980s, but then soon become kind of hidden mentality of the Shenzhen speed. And 40 years later, this is when Atelier XI came back to Shenzhen. And we can see the beautiful skyline and beautiful parks designed by leading architects and landscape designer all around the world. So the city is very different from its early status, and partly because the reason for me to come back to Shenzhen is two previous company I work for, the Beijing in Denmark and Stephen Holl Architects in New York. We both company had very good impression working in China, completing some of their best work. So that's how I started. However, as a very young practice, it's really hard to get those kind of high-profile projects. So we have to start from very small things, temporary structure, installations. So to prepare the lecture tonight, I put together all the project we have completed or in construction. So relatively small, from very small to small. And I put number like in a chronological order. And it's not necessary we are doing currently is bigger than what we are doing in the first place. Also, I'm very grateful for this opportunity for myself to start thinking about the hidden connection between different projects. So the first stage in Shenzhen, we started with some exhibition installation and some temporary structure. And thanks to the Biennale of Shenzhen, we get a few opportunities. I think it's still a great opportunity for young designers to start with. The first one I'm gonna start with is this Domino Pavilion for UABB 2017. At the time, I was full-time teaching in Shenzhen University, so it's a collaboration with Shenzhen U. The commission was about to renovate this rural village house into a Biennale exhibition venue. And when we went to the site, it reminds us a lot about Le Corbusier's domino prototype. So the first idea was to retrieve it back to the modernist prototype by taking extra partition walls. The second idea is we want to put a layer of intervention by adding pivoting doors, each by the column. And in this way, the space gets this flexible use depending on the status of the rotating doors. So we translate that concept model into an architecture drawing. So altogether for this two-story building, we have 30 big rotating doors, and they can be fully closed as pavilion, but they can also be fully opened as a public space. So this is how people experience this building, and it can be closed and open, and somehow the interior space can transform into somehow semi-exterior in this way. And we put the perforation holes on the facade to let the air and ventilation to pass through. And secretly, we put the pattern of Le Corbusier with his famous glass on the facade. So in this way, to show to the villagers this hidden connection between the modernist prototype and their daily architecture experience. So this is how the building opened up in the exhibition. At that moment, I think it was a pedagogical project for myself, because previously I never thought about open up my company and to do practice on my own. Because I think open a company means you need to have wealthy client, a lot of like resources, and a full house of consultant and professionals. But here, I think there are this informal area that you can bring up your idea to the local resident and work directly with contractor and workers. And there's a big room for the design experiment to happen. So actually, I was lucky to have a sequence of exhibition project. One of them were commissioned by the same client that commissioned me to do the Domino House. So that's 2 years later for the UABB 2019. This time the client said we have a bigger venue. That's the good news, but the bad news is we only have 2 months ahead. So how can you transform this big abandoned factory of 10,000 square meters into an exhibition venue in 2 months? We were very impressed by the existing structure, this rigid truss and column system. So we wanted to keep existing structure as much as possible and to put a layer of intervention as light as possible. So the lightest medium we thought that's light. So we proposed to have a 250 meters long light filled wall to reshape the this industrial space to have a chronological sequence for the exhibition to happen. So in the end, it only takes 20 days to finish the construction. We are ahead of time. And the we call folded time light line. This light filled membrane wall serves as kind of foreground in this heavy industrial factory, but it also becomes the backdrop, the background for a lot of exhibition and artwork to happen. So the challenge is how we can do the construction. So we put a key material which is very foldable, the membrane wall that can stretch 50 meters long with no seam, and the labor with no professional skills can do the construction work fairly easy. So we are very happy this project not only fulfills the requirement of the client, but establishes dialogue between the existing heavy framework and the newly added light structure. And in this way, we think this dialogue is kind of precious and influential to some of our later works. So the next stage, we start to have a few new construction. In the beginning, it's not in Shenzhen, and later we come back with some experience from the rural villages. The first stop we came to Shou is in the central China, and the first commission was to do a 300 square meters building for their county to facilitate the county's culture and art education. So I have to thank the party kind of official, the very young mayor of this county, who actually had a PhD degree in politics from Boston University, very bright and very ambitious about how architecture can change local art and culture education. So he showed me like 10 different sites and asked me which one is better to do this building and to have the biggest impact to the society. And it's really difficult to choose because each one is different. Some up in the mountain, some in the flower field, and also the location are far away from each other. So local residents are not that easy to get to one point. So I propose, can we break the design brief into several very small pavilions that can better serve the local community? And in this way, we studied local agriculture and cultural events. So we think by breaking a small building into a sequence of small pavilions, we can set up a year-long event to celebrate the agriculture production and lunar calendar event. So partly, I think they are convinced. And then we told them this can help you also for the financial reason, because the county doesn't have enough public money to do this building. But by breaking it into phases, we can build one piece step by step along the fundraising process. So eventually we decide on 7 different pieces, and that will be developed in 2 phases. On the first phase, we have the pitch hut, library in ruins, water theater, and the second phase we will wait for further funds to come. So in the very beginning, I want those buildings to be different from what the villagers can see in their daily life, because I think inspiring architecture can help them to rethink about their local environment and the space. So we designed these tree-like buildings with tentacles rising to the sky and framing the beautiful landscape surrounding. and they each has different gesture relating to their surroundings. The first completed one is the peach hut, which is located in a big peach tree farmland. And the reason we had this shape and this color, because during the first site visit, I was impressed by the full peach blossom. And it's kind of weird that all trees are leaning towards one side. So we are thinking maybe we can do something related to that to have a building that rising to the sky to one side. So after a careful study of the geometry, we provide a scheme that the building is cut through a sequence of invisible arcs. And we were quite worried that local contractor cannot do this geometry well, but they managed to do it pretty good with a small form, like board form concrete. And another idea we had is to try to do this pink color in memory of our first site visit. So this is a pretty hard one, and we sent architect live there and do all the mock-ups with them for about like 4 weeks. And in the end, we get the desired color and strength that we want. So that's the kind of the outcome of the construction. And the pink color of the building actually changes during the day. So this is in the afternoon. It has this warm light hue. And later in the evening, so it start to have a cooler color and become purplish. We prepared the visitors with a long pathway so they can go through the farm, the tree farm, and the peach hut will be at the end. And in the end, the wooden pathway become wider for villager gatherings and small activities to happen there. And in the end, we realized that the arcade is the place they like the most. They have a lot of like a grape tasting event and the kids playing around under the arcade. So another thing is we try to design this building with windows in different shapes. So I think that can help local kids to broaden their imagination. So like this window near the entrance, it's quarter circle shape. So framing the peach farm, our trees are in this stoop shape. So they have this kind of relationship. And there's another skylight. And we saw this beautiful skylight during construction in a spring day. But later in summer and in autumn, when we go visit, that skylight doesn't exist anymore. So the light kept changing during different seasons and also across the day. So inside it's a small space and we want it to be multifunction. So it has a small reception, a step sitting can be reading purpose, and also can have small gathering. And on the second level, there's a big window. You can look down and enjoy the landscape view. And we intentionally made the exterior concrete with small board form to have this rough texture relating to the outdoor rural landscape. And for the indoor, we cast it with smooth formwork, so it can better reflect the light. And that's how it lit up at night. And we tried a few things, and we want to leave marks to the building that only belongs to this site. And so for example, we designed this bronze wall sconce on the wall that's kind of mimicking the shape of the building. And towards the east, we cast a kind of tree relief, so that will face the sunrise every day in the morning. So the first building were accepted quite well. So later we had the second one. It's in the same county, but in a very different landscape. It's a village near the mountain. And actually, all villagers were moved from their old village built in rammed earth to their centralized new village of concrete. So it's a kind of pity that they have this beautiful old village large vegetation that abandoned, and nobody wants to touch it. So the villagers came to us, think we can renovate this place as their communal library. But we talked to local workers, and nobody can do the ram earth or this kind of adobe wall anymore. Instead, people, after so many years of urbanization, people do concrete really well. So in the end, we proposed, okay, maybe let's do a concrete one, kind of like sculptural shape that inserted into the old ruin. So the new building can become a device that people enter the ruin and become kind of platform that they can view the landscape and have a relaxation time. So in this one, we really hope to present this intertwined memories. So on one hand, the new building as an added concrete piece grow from existing ruin. And on the other hand, we collect a lot of old artifact, like this traditional wooden door. We put it on the new building. So this kind of constantly remind visitors about this dialogue between the past and the present. So this is the interior. Should I bring this? Yeah. So so the interior as a communal library and also can serve as a screening place. Yeah, and they have this bigger window facing the east and west to let the sun shines in, and it set up this kind of topographical relationship with the surrounding barren cliffs, and the meandering plan, the meandering space of the library, and the newly added landscape paths actually become part of this network of public spaces in the old village. So we even added one plaza in front of the building to have a more this kind of communal gathering for them. So once you get up to the roof, you can see a totally different landscape that's up on the barren cliffs. And on the roof, it's a terrace with slide and some stepped sittings. So during the daytime, this kind of sculptural piece looked a little bit dull, become kind of shows kind of a solidity. But at night, when the light shines, so all the irregular openings, irregular windows will have this twinkling lights and actually activate the public space outside. So the experiment of the miniature series continues. So on one hand, we are still working on the third one, a water theater for the society in the same county. And on the other hand, some of the formal language and the spatial experiment we carried to other places and developed further. Like this one was the latest project we completed in Shenzhen next to this Dasha River Park, which was originally designed by AECOM. So actually looking at the city with very dense residential buildings and office towers in the far distance, the city decided to provide a few public facilities in the park. And our idea is to use as little land as possible and to have this spiral geometry come up. And actually, local people call this one a tree house because they like enjoying the view on the second floor terrace and touch the trees. So we try to keep the ground floor as small as possible, leaving rooms for the vegetation and landscape to grow. Only necessary programs were left on the ground, like the public toilets that can be accessed, and also the counter space for the book cafe. So the interior follows the geometry of the exterior shell become a stepped reading room. And because there's a big playground for kids next door, so this one, the library seemed for kids. We had even a slide in the middle. So that's how people use. The kid love it too much. So actually, the operator, they nowadays they keep only certain hours for kids to play. So and inside the book cafe, you see all green are surrounding you. And we added this vertical fence because it's too hot in summer. So especially the building facing southwest with no big trees ahead of it. So it helps shading a little bit. And this is what we searched internet and found this recent status used a lot by the kid and the communal activities. Some similar project we did also in Shenzhen, back from, I mean, still back to this idea of continuity of movement and this dialogue with the surrounding landscape. This is a tourist center for a park named Cloud Park. Originally, we were requested to do a public toilets and then a book cafe separately, and also a gate for the park. And we decided to have this continuous canopy connecting them and forming a bigger public space. So the ground will be like more porous to the landscape, and on top is connected. So it will serve as a roofscape for all the high rises around it. So not only providing shelter for like rain and sunlight underneath this canopy, we also use these curves to frame the surrounding views. So sometimes the tree, sometimes the cloud, sometimes the cityscape, and some playful landscape undulating with the building. So we really think the architecture and landscape should be integrated together, and also the interiors. So we have all the ceiling continuous flowing from interior to exterior and have this very direct connection with the landscape. And a little bit earlier, so we had a similar try in Shouwu. So around the same time of the miniature series. So it's a big, not big, but it's a public cultural building in the middle of the flower field. But we think to build the building with single volume might be detrimental to the surrounding landscape. So we decided to break it into 5 different rooms that each are facing a different landscape towards different side. And it's very simple with these straight lines and cubical forms that very much just like local villagers' house. But inside we bring these curves and building wood with warm color. So it has this soft touch to people inside. So this is when it's in construction. It's actually everything. Okay. Everything we see on the screen will be flower in I think October to December. And in every room we have this very intimate visual connection with the landscape. And at night, the soft curve of the interior will show up amid of the sharp lines of the building shell. So, but unfortunately, after its completion, we never get to travel to this place because of the COVID shutdown. And so we hope really this year we can go visit the building during the flower season. So some of the idea that we developed in the rural area in the smaller scale are actually evolved and transformed into something we did bigger and in the city. So like the idea of the flower pavilion was later translated into a more vertical way in the Wuhan City Pavilion Kindergarten in the very middle of the city with all high-rise around it. So actually it's right by the Huanan seafood market where the COVID first broke out. So we got this commission in 2019 and it was suspended for 1 year and we thought it must be kill this project. But thanks to the great effort of local client and the construction team, it's finished in 2021. So the challenge of this project is we were required to do one structure shell, but can fit 2 different programs. So in the first 2 years, will serve as sales pavilion, and later it will transform into a 6-class kindergarten. So very different program and very different regulatory requirement and very different relation with the landscape and the circulation. So the breakthrough happened when we studied the 2 sets of design briefs carefully, and we found the program can be break into smaller compartments, and they are kind of share similar size. So the classroom, for example, in the kindergarten has this unit of 120 square meter, and that's more or less similar to the model apartment they want to show in the sales pavilion. So by breaking the building into smaller units, actually the unit can transform from one function to another throughout the time. So this is the first sketch and our study model in the beginning. We were thinking to put those compartments vertically and stack them as a playful spatial interconnected spatial structure for kids, and it also can serve as a showrooms for the developer to sell the apartment. And that's how the building can fit 2 different types of function in different time. And that's how it's complete the first phase for the sales pavilion. So really, we are thinking this building are internally as connected voids. So each void serving as a classroom or kind of model apartment, and the exterior shell will just follow the interior space. So in this way, the structure, the architectural expression, and the interior space are altogether integrated into one. And a few small adjustments need to be conducted after 2 years. For example, the big curtain wall, like this one, has to be revised to have more operable windows for the kindergarten use. And that's 2 sets of plan that we did for this one for the kindergarten in later, and this one for sales pavilion in the beginning. Yeah, and so we also challenged the traditional model of the sales pavilion as enclosed, over-decorated interior space, and we want to show the space as a powerful expression to the city. And actually, each room can become more or less like an ideal house for people to imagine their future living. And it's been difficult to decide what kind of material we use for this building. So eventually we decide with the white marble, white granite stone that can do good for both the kindergarten and the sales pavilion. So through like half a year research to mock up and to the actual cladding of the facade. So that's how large pieces of stone are installed on the during the construction. This is how it opened to the public. And a few of this kind of shapes serve as a space, and some serve as staircase for people to circulate around the building. And again, like we have this kind of conversion, maybe contrast. During the daytime, it shows as a white sculpture skeleton, and at night, so the skeleton will fade away, and with all space showing up as its expression. And actually, looking through the big windows in different shapes, it has different kinds of visual connection with the cityscape and the surrounding landscape. And kind of interesting that it sits in the middle of the traditional this kind of house, residential building, and newly high-rise, and as a kind of fairy tale, like kindergarten later for the local resident. So this is the preset structure measurement that we are going to introduce later this year to add it 2 slabs to hold more classrooms for later use. So that's the current status, and later it will become like this. So more playful landscape and a few more slabs for the classroom to carry. So at the end of the talk, I'm going to briefly introduce 2 important projects that we are going right now. So they are all happen in Bodh India. It's kind of far away from where we are. And the one project is actually the Mahabodhi Temple lighting design. We won the international design competition to do the art installation for the sacred temple inside this UNESCO heritage. Also, it's kind of Buddhist holy site. It is said the Buddha got enlightenment under the Bodhi tree in this temple. So we really think this is greatly connected with the spiritual experience. And we started the concept with a spatial mandala, a traditional Tibetan painting that depicts the universe in different layers of circles or squares. So the space with lighting will be provided through a sequence of changed colors and shapes. And the last project I'm going to show is actually the first project, the very first project that Atelier XI was commissioned. So after 5 years, we are still working on this. It's a 2,000 square meters Buddhist center for religious ceremony, and also as accommodation for practitioners to stay. And it's I have to say, in India, everything is different pace as in China, especially in Shenzhen. So we during the past 5 years, we spent a lot of time working with local teams to get the permit, different kinds of permit, and even and till now the building just broke ground. So we really hope we can see the building completion in near future. So that's my sharing for today, and thanks.
Much a wonderful presentation. We'd like to encourage the audience to share with us your comments or questions, and I will first let Roberto to join us and moderate the discussion.
All right. I'll start by saying thank you as well. It was quite enjoyable. You started by saying that you are a young practice. You used the word that you're in infant stage, but somehow kind of looking at the spectrum of your project, you seem to have been quite prolific in a way. And in addition, I also see a kind of continuity in the language of the projects, which I think is something that for most practicing architects can be quite challenging. And once you achieve it, you might make it look effortless, but I think it's quite difficult. And I wonder if you would like to maybe shed some light on somehow the challenges or the difficulties of retaining somehow a consistent, I will use the word language, but it has to do with scale, it has to do with quality, it has to do also with geometry and playfulness and things of that sort.
Okay, thanks for your generous comment. Actually, especially during the first 3 years, I felt every project is a big challenge, and we were thinking we have to come up with some idea new. But later, when I look back, I think maybe that's not new. That's just from something developed from previous project. So this kind of hidden connection is inevitable. But at that time we thought it's brand new idea. So it's really not something we intended to do, to think about this project. We have to keep the clue of the last one, but it's kind of coincidental result, I felt. But indeed, at current stage, sometimes, especially working on this lecture, so I start to think about what is kind of the clue, and not for the current project, but it's more like the direction, like going forward. So where we should explore further.
I quite like actually in the miniature series that you sort of challenged the brief in a way. You started kind of saying how the brief required a building of about 600 square meters, I think it was, and then you challenged the brief and sort of exploded it into a bunch of small little projects. And I think that as architects sometimes we tend to have differing opinions about the extent to which we can challenge the brief. And if we are able to challenge the brief kind of successfully, it can yield to invention that is not just about how we execute the project, but at a kind of very fundamental level, how it's kind of organized. So I'm wondering if you actually try to challenge the brief in every project as kind of like the spark of the design process in a way, or if you sometimes approach projects simply as, okay, this is the brief, let's implement it in a unique way.
Yeah, that's a hard one actually, because we both worked for Stephen Holl before, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I think that's a sentence he always say, question the site and challenges the brief, design brief, because he said that the brief is some kind of bananas, right? So when I look at this question, actually, some of the more experimental project we had in my mind are all related to that point. So, but we didn't carry that through every single one, because sometimes it's just really hard.
Right.
And with very conventional clients, they want to just to be safe with everything you did. So that's
Right.
very hard. For the miniature series, I have to say we are very lucky to have this client. So he actually push us to the kind of limit of what we can do with the architecture. So that's why we have to provide a lot of ideas out of box for discussion with him. So it's not like a lot of projects in bigger cities. It's really not about how much money you have and how big the project is. It's about how much ambition you have and about the thing you are doing. And if you really, like, I think the good client is like that. They really stand with you on one side and thinking how to make this thing great and really original. So not every time we have that great opportunity.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned sort of Stephen's advice on this issue on the brief. I get, I remember actually a different quote. I remember him saying sometimes that you have to pick your fights as well.
Yeah.
So in a way, that's a kind of slightly more moderate version of the same, that yes, you have to challenge the brief, but you can't really go challenging everything because you might be at risk sometimes of compromising the project in a way. I want to maybe shift your attention to a different subject. I'm kind of curious the extent to which you as an architect feel personally attached to your projects. Because I noticed, obviously with the one of the last projects that you showed us, the Wuhan City Pavilion, sort of transforming over time into the kindergarten, kind of requires an extended involvement and participation in the project through that transformation. But also you mentioned on the subject of some of the miniature series, how you're looking forward to visiting certain pavilions. Maybe it was on the subject of the Peach Pavilion that you like to visit it, or some other one. at a different point in time when the seasons have changed, so you can really see it in relationship to the landscape recently, you know. And you know, so I'm just wondering if you see them really as these subjects that you need to keep taking care of over time, or if will you at some point kind of just distance yourself and let it go?
Right. Actually, that relates to how we call ourselves. Our company name in Chinese called Yishu, Chinese meaning one tree. So in the very beginning, we thought we write down our philosophy. So we think maybe architect is not like God making everything and to provide living for everything, but we are more or less like a tree planter. So we put the seeds down and we care until it's kind of grow up, and we have to let it go. And so we really hope the architecture of the lives living in the architecture can grow in that way and continue grow by itself. It's not taken care of by us. And we have no such power to actually cover that. So, but to ensure its, to ensure its good development over the years, we have to think a lot about its preset management. So we do a lot of revisiting of our projects, and mostly for learning what we did wrong. And there's a lot of small details, problem, and complaints from the customers. So I think that's still part of the lesson we are paying attention to.
So I want to raise this issue of, not to put you on the spot, but language and geometry. You know, for instance, some of the miniature projects, they have, I would argue, a kind of playful geometry. And then there's a particular photograph, I think again, of the Peach Pavilion. It has a curvature that leads to the cantilever part, and there's a photograph of kids kind of standing beneath it. And I find that, you know, oftentimes kids are able to kind of discover the potential of geometries maybe much more effectively than adults. But you know, on the subject of geometry, I'm just wondering, like, you know, would you say that you have a language that is set in stone, or would you say that you kind of remain open to alternative ways of making form and defining floor plans? I know it can be a tricky subject, but at the end of the day, it's a bit like the elephant in the room, I feel. I mean, I think your projects have a consistent language, and that language sometimes is kind of conveyed through your geometrical moves. So I'm wondering if you can expand a little bit on that. Right. If you can or you want, because sometimes it can be very intuitive, but you know, if that's the case, then you can also just say that.
Yeah, I think for the past project, especially for the miniature series and the Wuhan one, it's almost just instinct right away. So, but I sometimes look back and to think how we can carry the energy further instead of continuing doing the similar thing all over. So I found the powerful weapon would be the emotion of geometry, if I put this way. So different geometry have different expression and spatial energy for people. So I think that's part of a question, open question that I have no answer yet. So that's part of the research later. I want to continue because we really don't want to repeat the stuff we already done, and we want to carry it to a different stage.
I'm wondering, I'm curious, because that's something that, you know, is difficult also to convey in a presentation, but I'm curious to understand a little bit better the design process in the office somehow. In one of your first slides, you know, you showed the team, you said they were very young.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm kind of curious to understand how that happens. You guys get a project, do you speak as a group? Do you give them a sketch, or, you know, you know, to what extent is it kind of you, or is it you collectively, or, you know?
For most case, I would give sketch right away after the site visit. So I decide what kind of direction we are going, and even sometimes in the first project, we don't have much to do. I will finish the 3D model and hand to the team to develop together. But later, I think currently we have more people involved in the early concept design process. I think partly because with this archive of project we have done, people are somehow more or less guided a certain direction of research that they can explore. And on the other hand, it's just the time-wise, I cannot do everything. So to some extent, I really admire Steven. Like till 70 years old, he's still drawing every single thing of the project. Although that also makes younger designer feels boring in the office to some way, right? So, but we try to get more involved from young team members.
No, but yeah, I mean, that's an interesting subject because although it might be sort of understood as maybe the chief architect being controlling, is also very much representative of the passion and sort of investment that the designer has towards the project, you know? And I think when the sort of chief architect is always involved in the project, no matter the age and no matter the size and no matter what, it really kind of is representative of the commitment of the main architect to the project in a way. So, you know, there's another thing that I also want to raise, and don't hate me for it, but I saw your sketches, and some of them they're reminiscent of Stephen Holl's watercolors to some degree, also in the use of color primarily also. So I'm wondering if that was intentional, or is that something that you sort of kind of intuitively absorbed through your experience there?
I think that's a bad habit.
You think so?
Yeah, because that's really intuitively what I learned. So I just executed that way in the early project. So I think I'll change method.
Well, I don't know. I wouldn't be so quick to say it's a bad habit, but I mean, because it works, and it works for Stephen. You know, it's a kind of very immediate way to get ideas out. And I would argue that sketching instead of watercoloring is a bit faster. So you could also say that it's an optimized kind of quicker version of maybe a similar method that still allows you to kind of directly, design in a way. And that's my observation. You know, maybe you disagree, but I actually brought it up because I kind of appreciate it. You know,
I think actually, I compare both, like just sketching with pencil or whatever pens I have, and the other way we sketch and then put the watercolor onto it.
Okay.
So
the color on the sketches is watercolor.
It's watercolor.
I couldn't tell. I thought maybe it was marker or
something. That's I'm doing exactly paying homage to the master. Okay. So I feel like putting watercolor is a way of representation. So in this way, the sketch becomes something like a render to my experience, and then become kind of a painting-like thing.
Right.
And so in that way, I feel it's more powerful because
it's also more personal.
Right.
Do your clients appreciate?
Right. So and it doesn't take much time to do. So economically, I think it's an interesting representational device, but it's not necessarily the quickest. I think in terms of the speed, I would argue that just pencil and the pen, that would be the quickest. But sometimes with this kind of representational process, you get more into it, passionately. Yeah, I think that's important. If I just sketch something really ugly with pencil, I don't like it, and I won't develop it further. But if I put whatever
make it beautiful to feel committed to it.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of the difference between different approaches.
I can keep going. No,
we can see if there's
how are
any
we doing on time?
questions. The audience, or maybe audience in the room. Maybe something to follow up on one of the earlier question from Roberto, because for the office like yours, you want to, in a way, diminish a little bit of hierarchies between the so-called principals and the younger designers. So in order for that to happen, like what's the tool to establish that common ground for discussion? You need to have something as a basis, so that when you're talking about design, some of the design comments, it can be received and responded by the other members of the team, right? So for example, like in Frank Gehry's office, those large scale 1 to 10 huge model of the entire buildings that can occupy the entire room, that's the common ground, right, for the discussion to happen. So I wonder what's the, for you in the past 5 years, how to establish that?
Yeah, I have to admit that we don't have a kind of a set of tools for design. So at a certain point, we are into big model making with texture and everything like that. But later we changed the method, and partly because of the nature of the project. It really requires more, quick response, and sometimes so the model process isn't fitting the project later we are handling to, I have to say. And so this process continue going, and we are still, but I feel like the most powerful thing is not something we spend a lot of energy doing. For example, I heard in some office, they only look at the models. They don't look at the computer drawings. They don't have this computer renderings at all. But I think some very basic diagram, concept models, as simple as possible, but that can convey the simplicity of the idea, that's the best. Because I think throughout our project, we try to be economical about the approach. So we don't want to spend too much energy. We do 10 different approaches for one project. Usually if we have 10 problems, we wanted to solve it with one approach. That would be the best. So the simple, the better, I would say. And that works also for the design and communication in the studio.
So I have a question. Thank you, Chen for being a speaker tonight, and I'm always very impressed by the projects in the rural countryside. And I'm curious, like you discussed about how you work with the clients in this case. So how do you get the commission in the first place? And then also, like, while working on the projects, not only that you have to work with the client, but there must be other stakeholders, the villagers. So are there any challenges that you can share with us of, the difference between working on projects like this versus the typical projects that we have in the city?
Actually, I don't feel the rural county are very different from the city, but maybe before I went there, I thought in the rural community I have to kind of going through a very slow process, so it's not efficient at all. But in fact, in China, the rural organization is very powerful, I would say. So once you settle the scheme with the decision makers, they have a wonderful execution skills, and actually that can cross a lot of bureaucratic process in the city. So we feel it's really, in that case, it's much easier than what we do in the big cities. Because in the big cities, we have to go from the level 1, we pass, and we go to level 2. But in the rural county, if we can talk directly to the official, that become a much better situation. And also they have a better imagination about what you can do. So it's not very practical sometimes, their requirement, but it's more ambitious in the way. So yeah, that's just my personal experience on that aspect.
Sorry, just to follow up on Yumi's question, because I really like the language of your design, but at the same time, they're quite unconventional. So when you're working in the rural areas, so how do they receive your design language? Because they're quite not like typical villages or typical houses. Do they find challenging? Do they find challenging to accept your language at the very beginning, or did you use some time to teach them? Oh, this is what a contemporary architecture is like, or did you make any compromise in your language during the process?
I think in the process, I find important that I came with a group of architect designers together. So in the way we kind of form a strong this kind of colleague networking like AIA. So I remember the first project series, 10周. So we at the same time we work at there and along with other architects and designers. So we always have this seminar process. So we went there, we each present a project and to the county officials and some community representatives, and then everybody talks. Like there will be a lot of very weird comments from local people, local officials, and some really ambitious comment as well from them. But there are scholars and architects. They have this more rational and kind of objective comments that can help each other to get through this process. So I really think this kind of collaboration, and we call 集群设计 in China. So many architects they do this the same project together. They each take a part and they discuss and they involve and they together convince the client. And that's a powerful tool, and it's become more and more happening now, I think, in China.
Great. We have some very positive comments online from Vicky and from Jay Lee. Very positive on the presentation that you just gave. And I also have a question from Florence. Thank you for your sharing. Great words and very refreshing. What are the advices you have for young designers starting their own practice in China?
I have to say it's too difficult. It's really, but I think when I study architecture, I went to Tsinghua. At that time, you need very high score to enter the school, and the architect was a very well-paid job. And so a lot of people, they don't know what is architecture. They went to the school to study it, and later, I think 20 years later, a lot of people are regretting they chose this because the bigger requirement from the society has changed. So we really have a lot of friends. They are keeping doing architecture only because they love it. So no matter how difficult that is, they enjoy the process. And so I think that's the kind of the fundamental question if you want to open your practice. Is like how much you can enjoy from it. If you really love it, I think just do it, no problem. There are a lot of things to do, like what we did in the early stage. It's not a lot of design fees or even no fees, but it doesn't matter as long as you get opportunity to do design work and to complete it. You will get this great satisfaction, and that's the most rewarding part. So yeah, that's my suggestion.
So don't do it for money.
Yeah.
Also, I think recently, both in Hong Kong and in mainland China, there's also this change in the mindset from the younger generation studying architecture. that they also start to think that it's fundamental for them to rethink the profession, like the way we work and the way we deal with clients, deal with different stakeholders, and also the way people start to perceive architecture start to change. There's also a reality show in China happening now that's about architects, and then they invite corporate architects and then independent architects like Dong to join the show, and then the whole show is about these fresh graduates from China, how they went through the process from being interviewed to internship and eventually where they'll get a job, and then people start to really interrogate the whole system of architecture, be it in the reality or in the reality show. So
Right.
I think there's something changing like these days.
I think that's a very good point. I was in Europe 2 months ago to attend a kind of a forum of emerging architects around the world. So I start to realize this profession isn't what we thought, and a lot of people are doing it in different ways. Like some architect I met from Thailand, they are doing architecture firm at the same time as this workshop to foster good skill carpenters. So with those carpenters, they can do their project very nice detail, and also those carpenters gain the skill and to kind of do better career with their own development. So a lot of companies are doing things like this. They are more active, doing things and integrated with the social aspect. So I wonder, maybe we should do some change to the way of practice. So maybe in a few years, we don't need to fully rely on the commissioned work. Maybe architects should step up and to propose things and to get the funding. So just like those technology company is doing. So I think only by changing the way of thinking, we can make money and can develop the profession better, I think.
Oh, that's a wonderful end to the evening.
Optimistic. And
Very optimistic note. Thank you so much for to everyone joining us online, and then we have also a wonderful group here in the room. Very much look forward to our next event, so please stay tuned. Thank you so much.
Thank you.